The merger of Local 832 and 111, the merging of two union cultures. The history of Local 832 is a history of mergers. Today, 832 represents workers from the retail, food processing, healthcare, security, industrial, garment, and transportation industries, making it a very diverse union. This diversity is a hallmark of the union today, but the roots of this diversity go back further. It was in 1979 that the Retail Clerks Union and the Amalgamated Meat Cutters merged as one union internationally, creating the United Food and Commercial Workers. It then took another decade before Local 832 and Local 111 merged as one union in Manitoba. This merger between the meat cutters and retail workers, although not the only merger in Local 832's history, changed the makeup of the union permanently and had a lasting effect on Local 832. The merger not only merged two unions, but two union cultures. What follows are some of the stories and memories of the merger between the meat cutters and retail union.
For instance, the Dominion stores, we had three unions, and we had the bakery workers, we had the meat cutters, and ourselves in there. And then jurisdiction became a problem, because even though we had the chain store negotiations with the four companies sitting there at the bargaining table, we'd negotiate alone, and then the meat cutters would negotiate alone, and so the company would start juggling, giving this union something here, giving this union something, and then you had all this going on, seesawing back and forth between the unions going on. So the merger was definitely the thing to do.
Then, of course, the big thing came along later years, merging with the retail clerks. I mean, that's another big step. It surprised a lot of people, because a lot of people didn't like those retail clerks. They don't know anything about unions, and that. I mean, that is a talk of some people, but that's just some of them. It took a long time to work out that merger. We finally, of course, got all our people merged here in Canadian Food and Allied Workers, but there was a retail section and there was an industrial section. So getting them both together. So I was the one that was appointed to do that too. And then, of course, Christoph was the one that was heading up the retail clerks. We had to agree at the top level, the executive level, that we would do it. And I mean, I was the one that was working with him how to do this. So we had different meetings at the executive level. So when we got the executive convinced that it was the proper thing to do, to become one organization, then we had to go back to the plants and have membership meetings again. And we went to every unit, to have a membership vote on the merger. They had the votes in their units and we had the votes in our unit to merge. And finally, it all went through. You look back now, you wonder why they were against it. But, they just thought that they were okay the way they were. They didn't need to merge. Why should we merge with those people? We're okay ourselves. At the higher level, we thought it was the thing to do.
Yeah, well, I always made pitch to Bruno Zimmer to merge with us. And then one day, one of his rep, Colin Trigwell, talked to Bruno and said to Bruno, we got to merge with Local 832. It's in our best interest.
We foresaw that we were eventually going to be merging with Local 832 because the international unions merged. One became the Amalgamated Meat Cutters Butcher Workmen of North America, and the retail clerks went to one union, became United Food and Commercial Workers. So we were now all one union on top, but not on the bottom. So our national office in Toronto, they said to me, they know that Bernard, Christoph, 832, were after me. And Bernard said, we should merge. I said, yeah, good point, but we're not ready. And then my national office said to me, before you start merger talk with Bernard Christoph, 832, he said, then you should merge your locals first. You should be one unit, which we did. It was a long process, a lot of headaches. I'm surprised they didn't have ulcers when it was all over. And we did it for self-preservation too, because it was fine, Local 111, but in the meantime, Swift wasn't around anymore. They were closed. Canada Packers was iffy. Burns Meat, they were bought and packing houses were closed down, flour mills were closed down, all kinds of places. The whole industry changed. So I went to the office Monday morning and said, "Who's still with us?" I said, "Another closure?" Honestly, it was awful, you know. It was awful. And Canada Packers, when they announced closure, that was a major kick at us. I mean, it was, what are we going to have left, right?
The meat cutters considered themselves as a trade, and that they were better because of the packing houses and everything else. And they, quite frankly, they were correct. Their trade union knowledge was better than the white-collar people that we had in the stores. No two ways about it. And they had a better education system than we did. And they trained their stewards. They had a steward system well before we did. And we learned from them. And I think we became better than they did. So when you look at Local 832 in particular, of all the UFCW locals across Canada, I'd say we're probably number one as far as an educational center is concerned. The meat cutters were better educated because of the plant type of unit, and you had the same people there all the time. They were stronger as trade unionists, no question about it. But somehow we got our act together because the companies were kind of trying to divide us at the time, and really it didn't make sense. This has got to come to an end, and it did. And it was friendly, and the exchange of members or bargaining groups, it worked out well.
Like our stewards were trained to file grievances. Their stewards weren't. They had to call every time they wanted a grievance. They would phone a rep here, and he would go down, file a grievance. Our stewards were all trained to file their own grievances. In first step, they would go to right management themselves, and if couldn't resolve, then they would phone the rep. You know? So there's some practices we had, and they said, "You mean you didn't call the rep?" I said, "No, don't have to. We trained our people. We went and had them at schools and everything else, and trained them how to file a grievance. You know." So we didn't have to run to every place, and they might phone and say, They might maybe phone the office and say, how do I put this down, or maybe what's the word for this, and we would tell them, but they would file their own grievance. That's just one example, and got it resolved many times.
The merger, I believe, was such a excellent thing to happen to us at Burns. Definitely was, for several reasons. One is we're a smaller local, so we had access to those resources. I don't believe our dues went up for a period of time, but we definitely got more value for our dues, I believe, totally. And the reason for that is we got our union magazine, so every member got to see that. So it wasn't just without a union magazine, it's controlled by those few people at the top. The access to the more training, better training, all that sort of stuff was really excellent as well. And you could actually see it and being able to bring in and have more at your disposal for the fight that we took on, for the fights after that the packing house industry has taken on. Definitely the larger local was better for it. The biggest transition was probably for the people that were in those power positions that no longer were there, because you have a lot of power when you're on a board of a small entity, right? So I think that would have been the hardest transition piece, where people would have felt it the most. But for the member working on the floor, it was definitely a huge benefit to them. And the tough fights that had to be taken would have been way more difficult. And we may have lost rather than, some you feel like you lost if you've taken wage cuts, but you win if you've still got the jobs there. And for the smaller bargaining unit, they may not have been there.
Once I was involved with the UFCW, then we started attending seminars, conferences, the Manitoba Federation of Labor. So you met other unions, and you found out how militant they were and what they were doing. And we were saying, gee, we have to do a catch-up here. That was obvious. Some of the unions were very active politically. Some were very active socially, helping the members one way or the other. I guess you get it from examples that are set. You go to the conventions and you hear the grievances and what's happening in the industry. So you said, gee, they're on the right track, and we have to do better for our members.